Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Thoughts by Jay Brown segment covering the national popular vote. Today we're going to be covering their myth about the constitutionality of what they're doing and whether it violates the Constitution. Again, I will try to be as unbiased as possible, however, I will be giving my opinion as well, so please stay tuned and let's kick it.
The Constitution leaves it to each state to choose the method of selecting its own presidential electors.
Yes, and you'll go over that in just a second, but I want to preface this with the states are allowed to choose their method, and that your odds, as I stated in the previous two videos, is not with the actual popular vote or electoral college. It's with how the states implement their way of telling their popular vote, which is a winner-take-all system.
Article 2 says, quote, "Each state shall appoint, in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct, a number of electors," unquote. 48.
And for those of you who are unaware, the section of the Constitution that he is referring to is Article 2, Section 1. The executive branch is Article 2. Section 1 is about the president, and it's the second paragraph. Each state shall, and I'll quote it as well, quote, "Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors." That's where he ended his quote. I'm going to continue. "Equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress." End quote. Now, there's a little bit more to that, talking about how the senators or representatives or person holding office in trust or profit under the United States shall not be made an elector. Basically, a federal judge in your state cannot hold the position as an elector for the purposes of the Electoral College. So, but you notice that he left off that section there. Equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. That is a key part, because most people don't understand why they have certain electoral votes, why certain states only get so many. And that is a very key point to the Electoral College. There are 435 members of the House of Representatives, and there are 100 senators, for a total of 535. Those numbers do not change. Until we get another state in the union, which then we'll go to 102 senators, and we'll go to, at a bare minimum of 436 representatives, depending on how big the state's population is. But be that as that may, I'm kind of rambling here. I think that's a key point that he left off, is that it is very important that we discuss that. And I will point a screenshot to the section I'm quoting, as well as post a link down below to usconstitution.net, which is the source of where I'm reading the Constitution from.
Quote, 48 states currently have so-called winner-take-all laws that award all of a state's presidential electors to the candidate receiving the most popular votes inside each separate state.
And again, this is true. 48 states do have winner-take-all choices. Nebraska and Maine have win each electoral vote on its own. So, the real question is, what is your issue with the current system? And I think we've already answered that.
These winner-take-all laws are state laws. They are not part of the U.S. Constitution, were never debated by the Constitutional Convention, and never mentioned in the Federalist Papers.
Yes. Never debated in the Constitutional Convention or the Federalist Papers. True. Because they wanted to let the states have some autonomy in the way that they handled their elections, much in the way that the states' rights are enshrined in the 10th Amendment. But for those of you that are unaware, during the time that the ratification of the Constitution was happening, there were two groups, both for and against the federalization of the government, called the Federalists for those that are supportive of it, and the Anti-Federalists that opposed it. The Federalist Papers were written by a group of men who did it so anonymously at the time, but we since know the authors. If you haven't read it, check it out. I think it's a good read. Unfortunately, I don't have my copy with me because I have it on my Kindle and it is charging right now. But really good read. And the Anti-Federalist Papers are also a good read to see why people were opposed to the Constitution to begin with. So, but to use this as basically an argument that what you're doing is justifiable, I think is kind of flawed here. You're trying to conflate the requirements to change the Constitution to overhaul the electoral system with the fact that this is a states' rights issue. Okay, I could see your argument on that. It is the states who choose to vote in a winner-take-all, which will be covered later on here. But at the same time, it is one of those I'm just floored that you would even consider dredging up the fact that it was never mentioned or debated. So we'll carry on with the next clip.
Only 3 states enacted winner-take-all laws for our nation's first presidential election in 1789, and all of them repealed them by 1800.
Okay. Then how long did that last? Why are we currently here?
In 1789, the legislatures of several states picked presidential electors without a vote of the people. The governor and his council picked New Jersey's electors. Presidential electors were chosen by the people from congressional districts in Massachusetts, by counties in Delaware, and from special presidential elector districts in Virginia.
Okay. So where in the Constitution does it say that the electors have to be selected by the people? I believe it was supposed to be said, what was it? Maybe I can put it up right here. Selected by the legislatures. Now in the case of the governor, okay, that's a bit of a stretch. That should have been the legislature. However, if the legislature told the governor that it was his choice to select the electors, then that's his choice. It's not... Oh, how do I put it? It's not... The electors are not meant to be voted for by the people themselves directly.
Yeah. So if these winner-take-all laws were not the choice of the founders, how did we end up with winner-take-all laws in all but Maine and Nebraska today?
That is a good question. One that I know you're going to answer here in just a second. But what I wonder is if the winner-take-all system is so bad, why haven't we challenged it in the Supreme Court?
In 1796, Thomas Jefferson lost the nation's first competitive presidential election by only 3 electoral votes, while not getting all of the electors from 3 Jeffersonian states, including North Carolina and Virginia, where the electors were elected from presidential elector districts. Even more alarming, the opposing Federalist Party won almost half the congressional districts in the 1798 midterm elections in Jefferson's home state of Virginia. That led Thomas Jefferson in early 1800 to write James Monroe, then a Virginia state legislator and later president, saying that while 10 states chose their presidential electors by legislatures or winner-take-all, it would be, quote, folly and worse than folly for the other 6 not to do it, unquote.
So let me get this right. Because he lost, and he wrote to his counterpart, James Monroe, that, quote, while 10 states chose either by their legislatures or by general ticket, winner take all, it is folly and worse than folly for the other 6 not to do it, end quote. I think is a bit overdramatic. The thing is, we are under the delusion that we vote directly for the president, or that we should vote for the president directly as the people of the United States. But, as I said in my small states video, we don't vote for the president directly because he doesn't represent us directly as the people. He represents the entity above us, above our local government, above our county government. He represents the states. He is the head of state, not head of people. That's where we have this huge disconnect on the Electoral College, in my opinion. You, when I say you, I'm referring to the people of the National Popular Vote Compact. What you're trying to do is not actually change the way we do things, per se, to affect a wider, better system. You're just wanting to manipulate this system to fit the outcomes that you think should be there. Now, let's go with the premise that you're right, you are making that change correctly. Does this really back up your claim that why we should change it? Because back in the 1800s, Thomas Jefferson said that all the states should follow the same. Basically, he's saying all the states should follow the same method. I don't think so. I don't think that helps you at all. I think that is one of those situations where you need to think about it. What is best for everybody, and what is best for representing the election of the president? And I still think the Electoral College is the best system.
The Virginia legislature promptly passed a winner-take-all law, maximizing the interests of the state's dominant political party, thereby guaranteeing Jefferson all of Virginia's electoral votes in 1800. Meanwhile, the Federalist majority in the legislature of John Adams' home state of Massachusetts became alarmed by rising Jeffersonian support in the state and repealed the state's district system, thereby guaranteeing Adams all of the state's electoral votes.
So we're talking about a tit for tat. Okay. Now, you bring up a valid point. Virginia did make this change, and Massachusetts made this change in response to Jefferson's popularity. But what you fail to mention is why Jefferson was getting so much popularity in this. And this is kind of a tangent here, so tangent alert. Anyways, what I'm trying to get at is under John Adams, we ended up getting the Alien and Seditions Acts, where it became illegal to criticize the federal government and officers of the government. And that's because the press was making fun of Adams and his appointees. Adams is one of the few presidents who didn't go with his successor through the inauguration. So it is one of those interesting tidbits of history. It is one of those interesting situations where we, as a whole, could do better to look at the context of the history and why things were happening. Now, with that said, this is what started the winner-take-all mentality here in the U.S., to which I disagree with. I think the Electoral College works just fine, but let's split it up and do the Maine and Nebraska way of electing per each individual electoral vote. So.
The changes in Virginia and Massachusetts initiated a domino effect in which each state's dominant party adopted winner-take-all in order to maximize its power. After 10 states had adopted winner-take-all, Missouri Senator Thomas Hart Benton warned that winner-take-all was not intended to give, quote, fair play to the will of the people, unquote, but instead, quote, was adopted by the leading men of those states to enable them to consolidate the vote of the state, unquote.
Okay, so as you stated, it is a situation where they created a domino effect, and you have this quote from Senator Thomas Hartman from Missouri. Now, I can agree that it was one of those situations where the senator is not far from being wrong, or being right, I should say. He's not far off from being completely right here. These situations were adopted by the leading men of the states to consolidate their power, which is what most people in power do. The problem is, you're just wanting to switch who has the power. And the power isn't supposed to be in the hands of the people in this situation. It is supposed to be in the representatives of the people. It is supposed to be in the legislature of the state, or the Commonwealth for Virginia. For those of you that think Virginia is a state, it is not. It is technically a Commonwealth. So, with that, let's move on to the next clip. Because, like I said, this is one of those things where, yes, he's right. It was the men trying to consolidate their power, to consolidate the vote of the state, but at the same time, you're not asking for much more.
Unquote. By 1880, winner-take-all laws had been adopted by all states. The National Popular Vote Bill is state legislation that would replace existing state winner-take-all laws with a new law guaranteeing the presidency to the candidate receiving the most popular votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia.
And there you have it. He just admits to wanting to replace one winner-take-all with another winner-take-all. The whole premise of his argument is washed away right there. He doesn't want to invoke change to make the system better. He wants to invoke a change that makes it so it's the same thing, but my team wins more frequently, or the whatever. That's the underlying issue there. That's the underlying thing. So let's move on with some other clips to see what else he has to say about the constitutionality of this process.
Columbia. The National Popular Vote Bill would not take effect in any state until enacted by states possessing a majority of the electoral vote, 270 of 538. After taking effect, all the presidential electors from the enacting state will be supporters of the presidential candidate receiving the most popular votes in all 50 states and D.C., thereby guaranteeing that candidate an electoral college majority and hence the presidency.
And so, to correct myself, yes, 538 is the correct number. I said 535 earlier. I was forgetting the District of Columbia. Now, with all of that said, your whole issue is with five whole elections out of all the elections we've had for president where the popular vote winner did not win the electoral college vote. Now, my favorite one of those is the one that had the biggest impact on the whole thing. That's 1824. Does anybody know what happened in 1824? If you do, leave a comment down below. Honestly, I think your expectation of perfect popular vote for the electing of a position that's not representative of the people directly is a bit asinine. I think it's a bit foolish. And what you're trying to do is subvert the responsibility of actually doing an amendment to change it. What you're doing is saying, oh, we're not changing this part of the Constitution. We're not getting rid of the Electoral College. We're just saying, if you sign this compact, your electoral votes go to whoever the popular vote winner is. And that popular vote winner for a long time could be one party. How are you going to feel about that when that switches away from your party, if you're the party is the one who starts winning all the time? So, just food for thought.
Some have couched their objections to a nationwide vote for president in terms of a democracy versus a republic, suggesting that a nationwide vote for president might violate the Constitution's guarantee clause, ignoring the definition of republic, which is based on, quote, the delegation of the government to a small number of citizens elected by the rest, unquote. The contrast between a democracy and a republic, as understood by the founders and as understood today, is that, quote, in a democracy the people meet and exercise the government in person, unquote, whereas in a republic, quote, representatives and agents, unquote, unquote, administer the government. The United States is a republic today and would remain a republic under a nationwide vote for president because whether or not a government is a republic is not determined by the method for counting votes used to elect the, quote, representatives and agents, unquote. Popular election.
Okay, so just so you're all aware, I cut out about 1:38 out of this video, just rehashing some old stuff that isn't exactly relevant. But this section here I felt is relevant. We're talking about what is the difference between a democracy and a republic. And Madison and Federalist 10 and 14 give some good examples of that. What I think we fail to understand here is that the way they framed the election of the president is very similar to what they're saying about the representatives and the senators, especially how we do it today. Nothing says that we cannot change the way we vote, how we administer our vote, how we tally the vote, etc. Nothing in the Constitution, nothing in the state laws say that. All it states is that the state's legislatures will choose how the electors for the president will be selected. Here's the thing. You have to look at the states as the common people. Okay? When electing the president is representative of the states, not the people. The people are represented by their state government and by their House of Representatives and senators in the federal government. The president represents the interest of the states as a whole, as a conglomeration. So, with that, I think we should continue on to the next clip.
Their governors. Some defenders of existing state winner-take-all laws would like the courts to read a restriction into the word state, saying that if nationwide vote totals were used to choose electors, then the state would no longer be appointing the electors. This argument overlooks the fact that the states of Nebraska and Maine currently elect their presidential electors based on vote totals from entities, namely congressional districts, that are not only not a state, but not even a unit of government.
So, how is it not a unit of government? A congressional district represents a congressional district or senatorial area. Last I checked, the members of Congress were part of the federal government, and they represented the people. So it seems to me that that would be a form of government. Yes, it's not a state, and per your quote at the beginning, states want to limit it to the states. The states are entitled to choose how they elect people, how they select their electors. So again, you fail to grasp what it is your complaint is against. It is not the complaint against the winner-take-all mentality. Your complaint is that it's not the winner-take-all that you wanted. What you really should be complaining about is how to fix the winner-take-all. Instead of making another winner-take-all system supersede it, make it a balanced system, much like Nebraska.
Some have suggested that the National Popular Vote bill might be unconstitutional because it guarantees a majority of the Electoral College will be supporters of the candidate receiving the most popular votes nationwide, thereby depriving the U.S. House of Representatives of the opportunity to choose the president in event of a tie in the Electoral College.
So much in the way of your issue with the winner-take-all but not really being winner-take-all, you have an issue with the House performing its duty. For those of you that haven't got it yet, the 1824 presidential election was one decided by the House in the corrupt bargain. I'll leave it for you to go look up, but it is an interesting read. Now, here's the thing. The House is one that is representative of the common man. It is why we have a 2-year term limit, a 2-year limit before being re-voted in, or before facing an election again, whereas the Senate is every 6 years. So this is meant to keep the common person placated in a sense of being able to affect change in their representation. Now, with that, I'm going to let him continue on for a longer clip than I usually would do, but it's basically the end of his spiel on the constitutionality, and I want to play it through for context. So give me just a minute to let it play through, and we will discuss it here in a bit.
The federal law setting the size of the House, itself approved by the House, resulted in an odd number of electoral votes for about a half of American history, thereby preventing ties in the Electoral College. If laws that have the practical political effect of preventing a tie in the Electoral College were unconstitutional, then the U.S. Congress was unconstitutionally structured for half of American history. Eliminating the possibility of Congress choosing the president is an additional benefit of the national popular vote law, not a defect, and certainly not unconstitutional. In their attempt to uncover previously undetected constitutional restrictions on the states, opponents of national popular vote claim to be constitutional conservatives, while overlooking the 10th Amendment, which reserves to the states all powers not prohibited to the states by the Constitution. The National Popular Vote Compact is a constitutionally conservative, state-based approach. It does not alter the Constitution and does not violate the Constitution. It retains the Electoral College and state control of elections.
So there's a lot to unpack there, people. He is correct in stating that there was a period of time where we had an odd number of electoral votes. And that for over half our country, if we were to take the mentality that taking away the House's right to pick the president in a case where there is no clear, defined winner, then we have to basically, we would have to negate the entirety, half of the U.S., existence. With that said, though, I think what he's trying to do here is make a bad faith case from this. The point of the House is to be impartial, but if you look at the 1824 case, and I know I keep bringing that up, it was not done impartially, and that could be probably said for all of them. They weren't the five that were, well, of the five that were done where the winner didn't win the popular vote and won the presidency. I believe only two of them were officially resolved by the House. That was the one in 1824 and I believe the 1888 election, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. That being said, the fact that we've only had to use this rule twice means that our system is pretty good the way it is. Now, like I've said, in closing, I don't think that this is constitutionally conservative. I don't think that it's not altering the way that we're doing things. What it's doing is it's not officially altering the Constitution, and it is not violating the states' rights to do so. I think it's violating the states of the states that don't want to do this. This is a situation where this should be brought before Congress as an amendment to the U.S. Constitution, for the simple fact that you have enough states that are saying no, but you also have enough states that are potentially going to say yes. What the National Popular Vote Compact folk are trying to do is subvert the Constitution in the way that the Equal Rights Act could not. And I think this really touches out how disingenuous they are in what they're trying to do. If they really, truly wanted to make the reforms that they claim they do, they would look to Nebraska and Maine as examples of how to fix it. They wouldn't look at it with derision and try to figure out how to get around it. So, with that, that's going to be the conclusion, at least for the time being, of this series. I may pick it up as we get closer to the election, but these are the key points that I wanted to bring up. The myth of the small states, the myth of the big cities and the big counties, and the constitutionality of it. I am not, by any stretch, a lawyer, a legal professor, or a true constitutional law person. However, I do look at the Constitution as the way it was written and also that it is a living, breathing document that needs to change with the times. There are things that need to be readdressed, such with the First Amendment. We need to expand what is reasonably considered the public square, what is reasonably considered where people are to talk about things. We need to look at things and explain them better. We need to have more of these amendments incorporated against the states. So, with all of that said, I look forward to hearing from you guys. I would love for you to leave me a comment if you want me to keep going after this and keep covering more of the myths. If not, like I said, I'll pick them up later. And I'm looking into the impeachment next. As of the date of recording this, the 21st of January, I plan on going back through the process of the impeachment and making videos along each step of the way. I find that it's hard to pull out my bias if I am actually in the moment fuming about the way things are going. The constant bickering between the two parties. We need to stop the partisanship and get back to bipartisanship in running our country. Like it or not, whether you like the guy, hate the guy, or like me, don't really care. Donald Trump won the presidency legally, fairly, and under the rules of how elections are run. If we want to change that, we need to change it within our states locally in a way that's not going to be considered amending the Constitution. Ultimately, what I would like to see if we are going to go forward with a national popular vote compact, rather than a winner-take-all mentality like they're saying, which they hate about the current system, switch to a system where you have to win each electoral vote. That will get the opportunity for areas like, say, Montana, where it is predominantly a red state, but the area around Missoula or Billings or Helena, any of the bigger cities where they might have a little bit more liberal leaning, that district could actually be won by a Democrat. And same thing in California. There could be areas where because it's a blue state, there could be pockets of red that a Republican candidate could win. That is ultimately what we need to do to solve this. That is ultimately what we need to do to resolve this issue. The Electoral College system works. It just doesn't work the way that we want it to because the states have decided to do a winner-take-all mentality, which I agree with the National Popular Vote Compact people is flawed. So, please look forward. Please hit the like, subscribe, hit the bell notification for future videos, and also, if you want to, watch the end. There will be links to my Patreon, Subscribestar, and when I live stream, I'll have my Streamlabs going. So, hopefully you all enjoyed this. Take care. Have a wonderful day.